Hey, this is Robert Ballard from Retro Car Guy 530 LLC. In today's video, I'm going to show you some maintenance and adjustment tips for this Chevrolet SSR Retractable Hardtop. I have a 2004 Chevy SSR here. I've owned this one for a little over 9 years, and I've had actually one of every model year, so from 2003 to 2006. The roof in all of those model years is exactly the same, so there's no difference in the tips that I'm suggesting to you for any of the model years. So with that, I'll go through some of the maintenance tips when it comes to the window and roof seals, as far as maintaining them for proper longevity of the seal and making sure they don't make any noise. And then there's some adjustment tips that you can make to the roof. Again, minor adjustments that you can make to the roof to help minimize some of the noises that might be getting generated by the vehicle's roof, especially over time as it gets loose and used. It might start being able to move a little bit, and you can make some minor adjustments to that. So after the intro and information disclaimer, let's come back and I'll show you the maintenance tips first, and then I'll show you the adjustments. So hopefully you find this helpful in maintaining your Chevrolet SSR retractable hardtop. Thanks for watching and coming back to the channel. Please review the automotive information, repair, and modification guidelines on this screen. Seek the advice of a repair professional if you're unsure how to perform any repair or modification safely and correctly. All repairs and modifications are performed at your own risk. When it comes to the maintenance of the Chevrolet SSR retractable hardtop seals, I put them into two different categories as far as types. The first category being the seal that actually makes contact with the window glass on the side, and then even though they're part of the same seal sometimes, the second category is the seal that actually makes contact with the actual roof metal material. The reason I say that is I tend to use two different protectants on those as far as maintenance. When it comes to the ones that make contact with the window glass, I have used this 303 Aerospace protectant over the last 15 years that I've owned an SSR and other retractable hardtop or soft top vehicles. This I found to be very good when it comes to lubricating the window tracks here, and you would basically get a lint-free rag, lubricate or put some on the rag, and then go through the track all along the side here and all the way down where the window glass makes contact. I found that to be very beneficial when it comes to any noise it might generate. Doesn't seem to be a lot of wear necessarily on the window contact here to the seal, but it certainly can make it quieter. And so I would use that. You can find a similar product that you can use for it, but I've had very good luck with this particular one. The second category is the seal that makes contact with the roof metal. And the reason I put it into the second category is because there's a lot of extra heavy contact and movement with the metal in the roof. So there's a lot of side-to-side motion or front-to-back motion that takes place with these particular seals. Given that, I actually follow the GM recommendation to use dielectric grease to lubricate the seals. If you look in the owner's manual, if I recall correctly, they say to use a GM dielectric grease. I use a generic brand, and I've used it over the last 15 years that I've owned various SSRs, and it's worked quite well. The only problem is in the winter months, given the fact that I live here in California, it does rain, and yes, I do drive it in the rain, so I know people are gasping right now, but yeah, I drive it in the rain. But given that, dielectric grease doesn't stay in place with water. I usually have to reapply this every month and a half or 2 months during the winter months. And I go through and I clean out any debris as far as any road grime that might have been collected. And then I put a glove on, and then I take the dielectric grease and I run it along the contact areas on this front A-pillar seal by the front windshield, the seal that's at the back of the front panel here, which is making the seal between the two panels here in the roof, and then also down here where the roof makes contact when it's in its fully upright position, and also along the base of the rear panel where the tonneau cover comes down and seals against that. Now that does sound like a lot to do, but it's actually not that hard. It takes maybe 5 minutes or so to do once you start performing that procedure. And there might be other lubricants that you might want to use, but I want to make sure you don't use anything that will degrade the rubber. So dielectric grease is fairly cheap, and it does the work that it needs to fairly well. So with that, I would recommend something like that. One additional tip I will give you as far as protecting your SSR from water intrusion is this seal that is at the rear of the front panel. has been a source of a water leak for my various vehicles. In fact, all of them, except for the very first 2003 that I had. I didn't have it during the winter months to really see it, if it had the problem. There is a problem with the seal not having a full water barrier from side to side. I found that seal has a piece of double-sided tape, and that double-sided tape does not run the full length, and that basically is acting as the water barrier. With the roof properly adjusted, it still puts pressure on this, and it might push down on the seal just enough to let water underneath this lip, which basically it's usually over on the passenger side, right above the passenger head or somewhere in this area, that it will sit down just low enough to possibly let the water in, and then it may come in and drip into the passenger compartment. So you may not have experienced this problem, but I have had this problem on 3 of them so far. So what I usually do is I get the vehicle, clean this off completely from side to side, and then I push down on the seal and I take a little bit of silicone sealant, outdoor clear silicone sealant, and I put it in between the metal edge of the roof and the seal at the top there, and then of course let the seal come back up and let it dry. And I've never had a problem after that. So if that's been a problem with your vehicle, you might want to check that out. If you push down on the seal, you can probably see the double-sided tape, and there'll be a point at somewhere along the run from side to side where the tape doesn't actually go, and that probably is the water intrusion point. And like I said, the most common one for me has been over on the passenger side, about 4 or 5 inches from the right side into the passenger area. There's usually an area right in there that water will come in. So with that, hopefully that's helpful to you.
This is a view of the retractable hardtop hydraulic pump that's in the roof storage bay on the driver's side of the pump. And you can see that there's a max and min line on that tank. And currently, given the lighting here, the fluid actually is at the max mark. It's not showing very well with the light coming from the side of the camera here, but the fluid level should be between the min and max levels. And at the very top of the pump, you see that brass fitting that is used to, you remove that to fill the tank to the appropriate level if your fluid level is not within the min-max range.
On the screen, I have some examples of compatible hydraulic roof pump fluids for the SSR's retractable hardtop. The GM part number is the one officially documented by GM, but is the most expensive. The other alternatives on the screen are found to be compatible or identical to the original fluid. The most readily available at this point in time would be the CHF-11S. Most good auto parts stores will have this available at a fairly decent price. And if you find ACDelco parts at a local dealership, you might find the ACDelco one as well, and you can probably find it on Amazon. And the other GM one that's on the screen at this point is the alternative from the Saab dealership that was available in the early 2000s as the alternative to the very pricey GM part number listed on the screen. But any one of these should work. I'm now going to show you the location of the roof door module, the RDM, which controls the retractable hardtop and the side windows on the Chevrolet SSR. It's inside the roof storage compartment, and it's in the box where the Bose amplifier is stored. It's on the top section of that, so I'm going to fast forward through removing the 4 nuts on the top there and the 2 clips to show you the location.
Now with the lid open, you can actually see the roof door module plus a few other of the components. This is actually the area also for the amplifier, the Bose amplifier in the vehicle, and a daytime running light module as well. So the roof door module is actually located here, the main long unit here, and there's just some clips that you push on each side to release it. And that is the roof door module with its 4 connectors on the back side of it here. And that's what controls your roof and your window module, your window up and down motion. So if this goes out, you need to replace it. It's a
fairly straightforward. Unplug the 4 connectors and then plug the new module in. There is a module for 0304 and then a different module for 0506. There is some claims of compatibility crossing those model year boundaries, but there are 2 different ones. And to install it again, you simply engage the clip on the one side and then on the other, and it's back in place. And then you install the cover again using the put the cover up on the 4 bolts up here, and then engage the 2 clips and put the 4 nuts back in place. In this shot, we're taking a look at the wire and tubing routing on the middle bracket for the tonneau cover for the roof storage compartment. And you can see that there are 2 metal clips that are used to retain the tubing and wiring harness. And over time, that can actually dig into the wiring harness, causing electrical connection problems or shorts. And also the tubing can be worn into by those. So I've placed, again, some soft-sided Velcro. That was my solution early on. I've heard a suggestion also of taking a used milk carton and cutting the plastic up and putting that around the wiring and tubing there as well. Anything that will take the metal edge away from the tubing and wiring to help protect them going forward, that's a good thing to do. Many SSRs have suffered from a roof malfunction because of that wiring being cut into, since it is on the bottom side of the routing there, at least on this particular vehicle it is. So you might want to take a look at that on your vehicle. Here you can see that I've enclosed the flexible tubing for the hydraulics for the roof and the wiring harness on the passenger side, and I've done a similar thing on the driver's side to enclose those in this split loom wire cover to protect the wiring and flexible hoses for the roof. Adding this protective cover on it, make sure that if it does rub against anything, it's rubbing against the protective plastic split loom wire cover there. So that's one thing you can add to yours if you haven't already, and you can see that I've done that from the point where the wire connector is on this wiring harness all the way up here, and I've put some zip ties around it to keep it closed, and I've had this in place for about 9 years and it's worked quite well. In this section, we're going to talk about the adjustments that you can make to your Chevy SSR retractable hardtop. Now, I have to stress that any adjustment you make should be made in very small increments and tested. Make sure that the adjustment is made on the same piece on both sides so that you have equal pressures on both sides. You don't want to get one side of the roof torqued to the point where it has excess pressure and that causes an uneven stress to be applied to the roof. So if you're unfamiliar or uncomfortable with this kind of adjustment, please make sure that you have someone review this video and review the suggestions here and have them perform the adjustments for you. But again, it's very small increments and equal application of the adjustments on both sides. So with that, let's go around the roof and I'll show you the areas that I have adjusted to virtually eliminate the noises that come from most of the SSRs that I've owned over the last 15 years. So let's take a look at those now. One of the quick tests I usually perform on my SSR's roof is to see if there's any noise generated when I grab the bracketry that's exposed here. There's a bracket that's right behind the seatbelt loop here on each side that's exposed. It's safe to grab, and I wrap my hand around it and then I'll grab it and I'll try to go side to side. And if there's any looseness in the bracketry up here in like the hinges or that pin that was to be rubbing up against the part of the bracket up here, or the rubber stoppers down in the storage compartment for the main bracket for the roof, usually you hear a clunking noise because there's enough play somewhere to allow the brackets to move around a little bit too much. So if you're not making any noise here, do that test on both sides. If you don't hear any noise, you probably don't have anything to adjust, at least not this part of it. So we'll go through adjusting and placing some padding in here, which is the way I attack this particular issue, and GM tried to attack the issue in the late model years as well, but somewhat unsuccessfully. So I'll show you that approach, and I'll show you some adjustments in the roof storage compartment as well that can help eliminate some noise sources from there. One of the noise locations tends to be the intersection between the rear and front panels. And let's look at the red dot that's on the screen here, and let's follow it up. And you can see what I have, some soft-sided Velcro up on this particular bracket. There's a pin that comes from the rear panel that rubs against that particular bracket where the soft-sided Velcro is, right here. And what will happen is that adjustment for that particular bracket will get some play in it, and the side-to-side play will be present in there and causing some clicking noises that are potential in that location. So the original SSR roof didn't have anything on that metal bracket, and then later model years GM put a plastic tape over that section where that pin rubs up against the metal bracket there, but that didn't stay in place. In fact, when I had my 2006 SSR, it was not present, or was destroyed to the point where I had to remove it. So my adjustment here is, one, to put some soft-sided Velcro in place on that bracket, and then two, that pin that you can see on the rear panel that has a plastic cover over the pin, and then there are some bolts that hold it on the rear panel. I'll give you a photo overlay showing it from a different angle. And what I end up doing when I added the Velcro on the mechanism, I actually moved that pin over to towards the outside of the vehicle just by, a 32nd or less of an inch, just to give it a little bit more room to account for the thickness of the soft-sided Velcro that I've got there. That way there's not any undue stress placed on the bracket on the roof. And with that usually then rubs up against the Velcro on the front panel mechanism there, and it usually eliminates the noise. Now, what does happen though is the soft-sided Velcro does wear out. It will cause it to be needing to be replaced after anywhere between 2 and 4 months, depending on the amount of activity and movement that's been placed against the roof by driving the vehicle. So I have not found a material that has had a longer lifespan there. I've tried felt and a few other things, so I just consider this a wear item. And it certainly at least eliminates the noise while it's intact, and I'll start hearing some movement again once that noise once it wears down a bit, and then I know that it's time to replace the soft-sided Velcro. Here's one of the adjustments that are possible within the roof storage compartment. It's a rubber stopper that is used to take out the play in the brackets that folds up when you put the roof in its upright position. So here's the rubber stopper itself, see the screwdriver there. And then here's the corresponding side that it meets up with when the roof is in an upright position. The original factory position for this rubber stopper, there's actually a yellow mark on this as well. There's a yellow mark here, and those were lined up from the factory. That's the initial adjustment. As you can tell, the yellow mark is not present, or at least visible at this point in time, because it's rotated to the bottom on this particular one. And I've adjusted this one to take out the slop in this particular bracket. That it was done by, I determined that by putting in a feeler gauge or using some dielectric grease to see if there was a gap in between this rubber stopper and this particular metal bracket. And of course, if you don't have a feeler gauge, of course, you guys with the cars out there that used to have points and you have a feeler gauge, you can use that to see if there's a gap. And then if you don't have that, the secondary approach was, like I said, taking some grease, or it can be any grease. It's just something that you can put on here and put it in like a swirl pattern with your finger, and then put the roof in the upright position and see if it makes contact. Because when you pull it back, you should see that the grease has been smeared a little bit, and there should be a corresponding amount on this side. If there is none, which I have had one SSR, there was absolutely no contact between the two of them. There was a large gap. So in that case, you want to adjust the stopper here, turning it clockwise, or pushes or rotates it towards the front of the vehicle, and then rotating it counterclockwise brings it outward towards this particular bracket. So if you're trying to take up the slop in this particular bracket, you want to rotate it counterclockwise, but only do it in increments of like a eighth or quarter turn at a time. And I've found that sometimes one side is a little bit looser than the other, so you try to apply the same kind of change to both sides. If one has no gap, but this one does, you can try to vary that a little bit. But whatever adjustments I found, usually if one side's loose, the other side is in a similar state, so you want to make that adjustment on both sides. But again, small increments, and test it. Getting the wrench on the nut that's on the back side here is a little challenging. It takes a half-inch wrench that I found with a slight bend to the box end of the wrench to get it on there. It will take a couple passes to loosen it so that you can move the rubber stopper. But of course, loosening the nut here might move this, so you might want to mark it where it started at, and then you can then judge how far you need to turn it after the nut is loose. Once you get into the position that you want it in, then you hold the rubber stopper and then you tighten this back up again, and then you perform the operation on the other side and then test it to see if that's eliminated your problem. One additional adjustment you can check for in your roof storage compartment is this rubber stopper that's meant to be a resting spot for this bracket for the roof tonneau cover storage compartment lid. So a lot of times I'll find this particular rubber stopper has no impressions on it, no sign of any contact. So I'll place a little bit of grease and a swirl pattern on here, and then I'll close the roof to the point where it's fully, this particular compartment lid is fully closed, and that way the bracket should be coming down and making contact. Then I open it back up and I check to see if there's been any contact in the grease that I placed on that rubber stopper. If there is no contact, what I'll do is I'll loosen the lock nut that's on here. It's a 1/2-inch lock nut, and that will then loosen this up, and I'll turn it counterclockwise to bring it elevated a little bit. And then I'll do that in like eighth turns or quarter turns only to make sure, until we finally get some contact. And over time, when it's actually contacting this, there'll be like a very slight impression on the rubber stopper itself. And that should hopefully eliminate any bouncing that might be taking place by the bracket if there's a gap in there. So the information presented in this video should help you maintain the roof seals on your SSR retractable hardtop, the proper fluid to use in the hydraulic pump system, where the roof door module is located in case you have to replace it, and some adjustments you can make to help eliminate some noises the roof may be making. If you liked the video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.